Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday Inspiration Podcast. I am Dr. Linda Marquez-Gedine, and we are coming live as we do every single week. However, last week we both had a little bit of an emergency that we couldn't come live, and y'all know we've been faithful every single week. However, this week, my partner, my co-host, Fernanda, has not been able, can't join us, so a lot going on. However, I am excited that, the topic that we are going to have today, and I have the best person in the world that's going to share so much information on fasting, intermittent fasting, the different types and what it is and how different it is for men and women. And how should we approach it? Because I don't want to say it's a fad, but it is something that you're probably seeing a lot of in the health and wellness for just body composition, but also there's other benefits for it: anti-aging, longevity, metabolic health. So it's really an exciting topic. So I am going to bring her on. She is back, and I know y'all loved her when we had her, but she's my personal doctor as well. I've worked with her, and I just love her. She's just amazing. And I'm talking about Dr. Felice Gersh. She's a multi-award-winning physician who is dual board certified in OBGYN and integrative medicine. So that is huge for us ladies, but also men, because she does see men in her practice. She's located in Orange County, Southern California, in the city of Irvine. It's absolutely beautiful there, and her office is incredible. And Dr. Gersh has been, she provides comprehensive care to all her patients. So she takes the best of integrative medicine and the best of traditional medicine, because sometimes there's cases where you're going to require medication, but she looks at everything else with lifestyle, herbs, with diet, with sleep, and of course, important things like stress management and the mind. So that's what I really love about her. And I wish we had more practitioners, more doctors like that are just really, really open. She's also been a professor at USC Medical School. So she's got a lot going on. Also, she's a member of the fellowship at Integrative Medicine through the University of Arizona, as well, School of Medicine. So she's lecturing there quite a bit. So she's all over, and you've got to check out her YouTube channel because she's got a lot of information there. And she's everybody wants her. Everybody wants to chat with her because she's just brilliant. So I'm going to bring her on, and y'all have any questions? This is the time. I have lots for her, but we're going to have fun. So I'm going to bring her on. And there she is. Hi, Doc. How are you?
It's so wonderful to join you here. And you have such a fabulous show. And I love you too.
Oh, thank you. Well, gosh, I just always remember how we met. And that was, gosh, how many years ago now? At least
a long time. I don't know, over a decade.
Yes, definitely. So, and it's just we keep growing, and I follow you, so I stalk you, and I'm like watching your videos and listening to you, and it's just you're such a wealth of information. And I know that this is up your alley, because with intermittent fasting, I just want to dig into this right away. Maybe people should you should give them a little bit of background, like, a little bit more you want to add to what I mentioned, because you have a very busy, successful practice, and you have just so many different modalities to really, it's just a high class practice that you have, and just, that's so awesome. So share with them, because there's some locals from Southern California too listening.
Well, I can't believe it now, but it's been 14 years after doing thousands of deliveries. It felt like it was the right time to move on from doing obstetrics. And I'd always known there was way more to maintaining health than just pharmaceuticals and surgery. So in my practice, I had like I would call them my ancillaries. I had Chinese medicine practitioner, massage therapist, biofeedback, nutrition, psychology, but I didn't have any special training myself. But after I gave up obstetrics, I think I had more sleep, a little bit more time. And I looked at my therapeutic toolbox, and it was like, I don't know what I have to offer people. It seems like I was very good at surgery, but it's like, people would come in and they would be told, well, it's not needed to do surgery now, so we'll do nothing. And then when you get really bad, then we'll cut it out. Or, the go-to for everything seemed to be birth control pills. And I looked into like, what the heck we're giving everyone birth control pills and what are they? And of course, I realized very quickly that at best they were helping with some symptoms and certainly we're not getting to the underlying cause. So that's when I went on my journey, and I ended up doing the fellowship for 2 years at the University of Arizona School of Medicine, and basically expanded my therapeutic toolbox so that I have more to offer. And in the process, I had to go back and reteach, and sometimes for the first time, because they didn't have this information back when I was in medical school, learn about cell biology and physiology and really try to do a deep dive into what is going on in cells, what is happening that is causing all of these metabolic problems and all of these symptoms. And I just was in practice for so many years, and I saw people getting sicker and sicker, basically, and worse manifestations. And of course, aging and menopause occurs to every woman.
Yes.
And so basically, I have all the conventional tools, and then I have the expanded tools that are offered by incorporating all aspects of lifestyle medicine, herbals, nutrition, mind-body medicine, and so forth. And certainly one of my big tools, as you alluded to, is utilizing time-restricted eating and various forms of fasting so that I can harness the innate mechanisms that exist within all of us to help us to heal and optimize our health.
I think that's awesome. And it just made me think, how would doctors, traditionally trained medical doctors, what if they were told, for 24 hours, you cannot use your prescription pad? What would be their alternative modality? I mean, you have tons of tools now, but most of them don't.
Well, that's what drove me. And I don't understand the thinking, but I mean, I sort of do and I sort of don't. Like, how can people who are doctors simply keep prescribing things that they know are really not helping very much and have such a large array of side effects? And, there's like every drug has issues. I mean, so that doesn't mean drugs shouldn't be used. I use drugs, but I use them as much as I can as a therapeutic bridge to health, as opposed to a lifetime prescription, to try to suppress some symptoms. So it's definitely a challenge for conventional medicine. And I think that's why so many doctors have what is labeled burnout, because they feel helpless. They don't know how to help their patients, and they can't, just keep prescribing the same 5 drugs and then feel good about it at the end of the day. And in their heart, they really want to help. And that's, of course, that's how I felt. I felt I can't just do the same things and tell people, this condition, endometriosis or fibroids, they're not bad enough to require surgery, so we'll do nothing. It's like, that is not a solution. Or now, of course, the solution to everything other than birth control pills for reproductive age women is to take away their hormones. So we have all these drugs that basically shut down ovarian function. So it's like, okay, so we will take away your hormones. So now you don't have any. Problem solved? I don't think so. It's like, I don't think that's problem solved. Now you have no hormones. So, it's like, these solutions are just not solutions.
Yes. So I'm so glad that you are leading the pack with the information and research and teaching and so forth. So hopefully more doctors are getting on board. I do see that. So I'm very grateful that you're one of the leaders that's leading. And they say that the leaders, they're throwing rocks at you, but you know what? You're just going to continue to just go and set the pace. So I'm very, very grateful. So I know that you use intermittent fasting as a modality as well in your practice. Can you kind of give us a little bit idea? Because when people think about intermittent fasting, they just think, oh, you're starving yourself and you're going to lose all this muscle mass, and I can't do that. So I know there's a lot of people that are interested, but they don't really know. So how do you explain it to your patients? We're gonna do intermittent fasting. They just want to run.
Well, we all love to eat, and the reality is that we humans evolved during a time when food was not always available. So it's survival. It's all about survival. So how could we as a human species not have become extinct? In fact, they've looked at Neanderthals and they figured that based on the size of their skull, Neanderthals were smarter than us, Homo sapiens, but they became extinct. And why was that? Because it turned out that they were not as good at surviving famines. We humans have really mastered the art of surviving famines to quite a degree. Obviously, there's a limit, but you've seen people in areas where they had no food, or prison camps and concentration camps, and they were deprived of food, and you can't imagine how they were still even alive based on their skeletal look and so on, because our bodies have adapted for survival to being capable of dealing with lack of food. And it's not that we never want to starve people. It's just that we as Homo sapiens have evolved so that we're better at it than other hominoid species that became extinct, like Neanderthals, who were very smart, but they couldn't survive when the food was scarce. So we actually evolved not to be starving, but to survive when we have to, at least to a large degree, up to a point, but to actually be optimally healthy when we have food. And then sometimes we don't have food. That's how we evolved. And there are certain very specific mechanisms in the body that will not be triggered, that are really very restorative, rejuvenating, but they won't be triggered unless we stop constantly feeding. So once we just understand that we evolved, and the Chinese had it so right. I don't know how they figured this out so many thousands of years ago. They were so smart, but like the yin yang, right? There's always hot, cold, push, pull, feed, stop eating, So our bodies can't be healthy if we're in a constant state of feeding. And we just have to accept that. And there's different types of intermittent fasting. So basically, fasting is very simple. It means not eating, right? So the definition of fasting is you're not eating. So then we have to look at, so what's the optimal way to go through feeding and fasting cycles? So we have to go and look first at our circadian rhythm. So we are earthlings, and I love science fiction. I love the idea of space travel, but we evolved on Earth, as did every other creature on Earth. And by doing that, for survival, once again, we adapted to the 24-hour rotation of Earth on its axis. And that's been labeled the circadian rhythm. We humans are diurnal. That means we are metabolically active during the day, and at night, we are in a totally different state. It's like we're two creatures, day and night creatures, and they're very different metabolically. Our immune cells are different, or everything is like different. Even our gut microbiomes are acting differently in the day and in the night. And as diurnal creatures, we should then accept that we are genetically programmed to eat during the day and not at night, to be awake during the day, to be asleep at night. When people come to me, my patients, and say, I'm a night owl, I'll say, well, you are not an owl, and you are maladapted. And you are not, an alien creature. You're a human, you're a diurnal, and you're genetically programmed. It's not changeable. It would be like, it'd be so convenient if I had a third eye at the back of my head. Then I could always see who's behind me. It's like, like we're used to cars now that have like cameras looking. Like, no, we do not have an eye in the back of our head. We're not genetically programmed to wake up and have another eye. So we are not genetically programmed to eat at night. It's that simple. So the first kind of fasting that I recommend is based on the circadian rhythm, which means that we should eat during the day and not eat at night. It says, that's where I start. For people who are like munching there are people that wake up in the middle of the night and start eating.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, they really are. And so at least I begin with eat in the day, don't eat at night. That would be like 101. Then the next thing is we are genetically programmed to be most insulin sensitive. That means we clear the glucose from our blood with less insulin in the morning. So that means that the old statement of, eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a queen and dinner like a pauper. I don't know who came up with these amazing like cliches, but it's true too. So we are genetically programmed to deal with food better in the morning. Our GI tract, which has its own neurological system called the enteric nervous system, is also programmed to work better. So we'll have better digestion, we'll have better poops, we'll have better, and that's why when people eat at night, they have so much heartburn, because, you're not digesting properly. Your peristalsis, your enteric nervous system, isn't programmed to receive food at night. So nothing works right. It comes up and then you get acid reflux. So the thing is, if you eat a huge amount of your food, as much as you can, you may have to work into this for breakfast. And they even just came out recently with a study that says if you eat breakfast by 8:30 in the morning, you're even best off. They have studies that show that you're less likely to get plaque and atherosclerosis in your arteries when you eat breakfast. You're less likely to become diabetic. You're less likely to be overweight. And there was a very interesting recent study that showed that when people ate a very healthy, now we're not talking about, Fruit Loops and, Captain Crunch for breakfast with bagels and pastries. No, we're talking about like food, like really healthy, farm to table, organic fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and all the good stuff. And you're eating a bunch of it for breakfast, a big percentage of your food for the day. And you have a lot of protein for breakfast, but, not like a ton of animal. We're talking about like, plant-based proteins and maybe a little bit of animal, like 3 ounces. And when you do that, they actually did brain imaging studies. Like, it's so fascinating. They found that the amygdala of the brain and the frontal lobes, and the amygdala is about urges, binge eating, when you impulsive behaviors, bad judgment calls, and so on, road rage, that whole area of the brain was in a happy state. And the frontal lobes, which are about focus and memory, performance, they were much better functioning. So if you eat breakfast, you will perform better, your brain will work better, you'll be less likely to have urges and cravings and want to, randomly eat garbage during the day. And even it made you not want to eat at night. And this was like, they did this on quite a few people. This was universal. So you can, it seems like that can't happen. I can't get rid of my urges and my binging and all of that, my night. But it really does work because that's when we're eating according to our circadian rhythm, and you stop snacking. And so that is what we would call in the type of intermittent fasting, time restricted eating. We eat according to our circadian rhythm. And once people master that, and that takes, a lot of work, because obviously, and that doesn't mean that you can't cheat. Look, if you're invited to a fancy dinner party, or if those things come back, and they will, depending on when you live, I'm in California, so that, is just barely starting to come back on the horizon. Some states, they've been doing it. But, when you get invited to some wonderful event, that doesn't mean you can't eat at night. It's just you don't want to do this on a regular basis. But then you can move into the other types of fasting, the more advanced, where you can do alternate day fasting or alternate day modified, or the 5-2. Now, when you do what we're talking about here with this type of intermittent fasting, this type is predominantly for people who have metabolic issues like metabolic syndrome. They have insulin resistance. Maybe they're diagnosed with prediabetes, even early stage diabetes. But they're not needing, all kinds of they're not on a bunch of pharmaceuticals that they can make you hypoglycemic. So, that you have to be careful about. And people who may have some earlier stages of hypertension, and they have weight that needs to be lost, right? So they have too much visceral fat, the belly fat, and so on. And their body composition isn't right. So then you can do these types of fasting where 2 days out of the week, but not consecutive, or you can pick every other day, and you either don't eat any food, just drink fluids, and herbal teas, or you can have a modified fast where you can eat no more than 25% of your normal caloric needs, predominantly in the form of fats. So that doesn't raise your insulin or glucose. So you would have like some macadamia nuts, not very many, or a little bit of avocado or some olives. and that just a little bit, like maybe midday, and that would be it for the whole day. And you would do that either twice a week or every other day. And that has been shown to help people reverse prediabetes, diabetes, can help regulate your blood pressure, lose a lot of weight. And of course, the goal isn't to then just eat garbage the other days. Obviously not, then the other days you're still going to do your time restricted eating with the big breakfast and, the early lunch dinner type of thing, and putting all that healthy food into your diet. And that can also be a game changer for weight. And then and then
I've seen that.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention to you, and because I was doing, and I had listened to one of the podcasts you were on about, I was doing regularly a 24-hour water fast every single Monday, but we've had some challenges these past few weeks with family, and it kind of disrupted my whole routine for like 5 weeks. So I'm getting ready to get back on it. But I personally feel good when I do a water fast. I know not everybody can do something like that or should immediately go into a water fast, because they have to be more like fat adapted and make sure that their body can handle that.
Right. Absolutely.
For some people, they'll get a headache, or they're like, oh my gosh, it's 22 hours. I have 2 more hours to eat. And then they break their fast in not a positive way. So it almost like unravels the benefits of it. So there's also a way to do that. And especially with women, and it's so different with women and men. But one thing that I really, as I was just digging into the research too, and it's so difficult with the research because it's hard to control humans, and to say, okay, you can only eat between this time and this time, and really do a very, I would say, extended study, because of so many parameters involved, where the age, if it's a female, it's even more diverse, because are they PMSing, did they have stress? How much sleep did they have? What did they eat? Did they work out? Are they on medication? Are they on hormones? There's so many different variables. So it's more difficult with women trying to get studies just done on real females, humans, not, mice. So that's been kind of the challenge. And you and I being in practice and seeing patients on a daily basis, you almost have to customize that to determine which fast would be beneficial for them, correct? Like all the different ones.
Absolutely. And I learned this the hard way with my patients too. I never start with true like 24-hour or longer fasts. I never, because people feel lightheaded because they're not able to, like you were saying, what's happening is that their mitochondria are so poorly performing that they can't convert from burning glucose to burning fat. And and that's what they need to do, because once you lose your glycogen stores that are in your muscle, in your liver, then you have no glucose in your body. And the only other way you can get glucose is by burning muscle. And then that's obviously not what we want to do. And that's what happens to people. That's how come people who are not doing things right, if you actually did a body composition, you find that they lost a lot of lean body mass, which is critically important for 1,000,001 functions in the body, including regulating blood sugar and metabolic health. We now know that muscle is an endocrine organ too. Everything is but we never knew, like there are muscle hormones called and signaling agents called myokines that are really important for the metabolic health. So we don't want to lose our muscle mass. That's why, we really want to make sure that we do everything right, because, and then you don't want people passing out, getting palpitations, tachycardia. And so, that's why I always first we work on timed eating within the 24 hours before we go. But, someone like you and also myself, we're able to convert seamlessly. That's what we're supposed to convert seamlessly from burning glucose to burning fat. You don't even miss a beat. You don't even feel a thing. But other people, they go through these episodes of major hypoglycemia because their brains can't get enough energy. Their blood sugar is dropping and they can't burn fat properly. So that's why when people are doing fasts, I tell them, if you are feeling that way, you don't have to break your fast. What you can do is eat a little fat. That will help. It won't destroy everything if you don't eat too much of it. But if you just have a few slivers of avocado or eat like 6, 7, 8 olives, that will provide the fat that your brain needs while your body is transitioning from burning sugar into burning fat, and you'll start mobilizing your fat stores. So it's it's a challenge. That's why I like to work with my patients when they first get into this type of thing, because sometimes we're surprised, and I've had patients who have thrown in the towel and started rampaging through the pantry, like you said, and somehow everyone seemed to have a secret stash of peanut butter and jelly that they would just dive into. It's like, no, this is not, and then they feel terrible, right? So then we don't want our patients feeling like failures because they couldn't do it. So, we want to work in gradually. And when I talk about eating so much of your food for breakfast and then a really light early dinner, I realize that that's a goal, right? So that's why, we talk about my 101 is just eat in the day and stop eating at night, right? I can't even do beyond that. Just like, can you just stop eating at 7 p.m.? Like, I can't even worry about more than that. Just stop at 7, and eat breakfast. We'll start with that, right? And then we work it, into the more advanced, stages. But, and it is, we have much more data on mice than we do on humans. That is totally true.
Yeah. And it even depends on individual. Like if it's a person that is on the standard American diet, they still can, a beginning point for them would just be just like you said, is like, okay, stop eating at, let's just say 5 or 6 o'clock, or when
even better, even better. Yeah, even better.
And then, and just don't eat at all for that time. Or a person that's, more like keto adapted or, Paleolithic, or more mindful of what they're eating and sticking to a whole food,
exactly.
eating. You can play around with it a little bit more, because most of the time they're already fat adapted, where you can start extending those periods or play around with the window. Because I love what you said, that I would periodically do an OMAD, 1 meal a day. And sometimes it's hard, because I'm like, I got to get in all my nutrients in one meal. That means I'm going to sit down and eat like 90 to 100 grams of protein, where most of the time I try to do my eating template where I'm having some protein at every meal, just because, we become anabolic resistant as we get older. And of course, estrogen that's a whole different conversation.
I know, but absolutely.
Estrogen as well. So, and that's just like what I see, even the challenges with women who, they come in, and I know we both see this in our practice. And what do they talk about? How do I get rid of this belly fat? And they're eating less, right? And what are they munching on? Crackers and cheese.
Oh, it is terrible. And women are definitely have unique challenges, because women have, reproductive cycles. We have hormones that shift through the whole cycle. And we also are the ones who go through pregnancy. Not every woman goes through pregnancy, but many do. And that's a huge stressor on the body. And, you have to recover from it. You also have to prepare for it, because we want to be really healthy for every pregnancy. And then every woman universally will go through menopause, which is really unfortunate in the term, because it makes it sound like it's just about, your period ending. But, we've talked about this. It's really a huge metabolic shift when you lose your hormones and you become insulin resistant immediately, and you have altered gut microbiome, and you have chronic state of inflammatory cytokines, circulating, and more inflamed. And that's what triggers so many of these problems, including belly fat. So I call it the default. And you can have these same problems, though, at every stage of life. So when you're older, we call, and we have this chronic inflammation that drives all of these processes. We call it inflammaging. But when you're younger, and you could be any age, in your 20s, we know that kids are now getting fatty liver. That is a horrible sign of metabolic dysfunction, that we call it metaflammaging, metabolic dysregulation, causing chronic inflammation and precocious aging, you might call it. So that you're aging, even that's why they have all this conversation about biological aging versus chronological aging. And one of the things that is amazing is that we can actually reverse our biological aging to be younger, than even our chronological aging, if we do the right things. And even if our biological aging is worse than our chronological, because it's like you get a test and you're like, say 50, and it says you have the health of and metabolic state of a 70-year-old. It's like, what?
No.
But you can turn that back too. I mean, you say you can't turn the clock back, but you can turn your metabolic aging status back. And one of the key tools is different types of fasting. So it is so amazing because, it can, once you get into a longer fast, so there's many benefits to time restricted eating, fasting during the 24-hour day, once a week fasting, twice a week, or even every other day. But until you actually get a good 3 days of water fasting in, or if you utilize like a fasting mimicking diet, until you get that far into a fast, you're not going to trigger what is called autophagy, which is a cellular like house cleaning, where the cell, if it doesn't have any nutrients coming in for that long, it has to do something. So what it does is it actually does housekeeping. It takes its own structures, membranes and such, and puts them into, I call it the recycle bin, the lysosome, and then it spews out the foundational building blocks, the amino acids, the fatty acids, and so on. And then it creates new structure. So it's like taking your house, demolishing it, and then rebuilding the inside, or like redoing the whole thing. So basically the cells fix themselves from the inside, and even the mitochondria go through this mitogenesis, where mitophagy, where they actually make more and they make themselves better and functioning better. And old crappy cells filled with misfolded proteins, this what we call the senescent cells, they're taking up valuable nutrients. So the body knows which those are. And when you fasted for a few days like that, then it just knocks them off. So you get rid of these really crappy cells, and then you rejuvenate your good cells, and you actually can see organs shrinking and then regenerating. Okay, so that's like the miracle. And that's one of the few things that can actually cure fatty liver. Exercise also, by the way, which, by the way, exercise has a lot in common with fasting. It creates this little stressor in the body, and then, then you get this rejuvenation. So you have to create this bit of stress, and then you get the rebound effect, like, the healing effect. And of course, they do that in the skin when they do things like laser treatments, right? They like do damage with the laser, and then the body says, okay, now I'm going to heal it. And it, creates new collagen and fixes things. And then we're better than we started. So we have these amazing abilities to heal from within, rejuvenate. But that requires these few days of fasting. But this is advanced stuff, definitely advanced, And so it's certainly not for just random, like, I think I'm just going to start fasting for days. And it can trigger problems. People can get lightheaded. You can actually trigger palpitations, tachycardia. So I always recommend that any type of fasting other than through the 24-hour day, it really should be with some kind of supervision. So because you don't want to get into trouble, that's for sure. And it's not for everyone. What if you have underlying medical conditions that would make it not appropriate? So, but just to know that these things are out there, and they can be wonderful for women who are like going through the menopausal transition, women who want to get healthier to prepare for a pregnancy, not while you're trying to get pregnant, but ahead of time, or people who have developed that metaflammaging problem, where they're metabolically unhealthy and prematurely aging, and say, enough of this, I'm ready for change.
Yeah. Now, what's the difference? Because, I mean, we already know, like, typically, like you mentioned, if you're pregnant, you definitely don't want to do fasting. If you have body image issues like anorexia, you definitely don't want to do that. Or if people that are very frail, you don't want to do that. Now, how about women? How is it different? Like women that are still cycling, women have very robust cycles, and then the women that are no longer cycling and no longer have periods anymore. Now they're in menopause because there's kind of that sweet spot with hormones, peak of various hormones when a woman is, still at the age where she can conceive, and estradiol is very robust. So there's a different approach of how you would, if you had a patient that was 25 years old and also a patient that was 55 years old. So let's just say that they both are more for like, one's anti-aging, the other one's like, I just want to be healthy and just, they're thinking about their future. The 25-year-olds think about their future, and the 55-year-old now is just like, I want to reduce the,
facing reality.
Yes.
So, well, for women who are cycling, so they're not on, oral contraceptives or some other hormonal thing that's, preventing them from cycling. We definitely want to do the time restricted eating. That can be every time, because in fact, there's studies for women who have irregular cycles, like women with polycystic ovary syndrome, that when they do the time restricted eating with the bigger breakfast and so on, they actually start ovulating and cycling. So that is a fertility tool as well as a health tool. But in terms of a multi-day fast, like there was like this flurry of studies that were funded by the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, back in the 1990s. I mean, I don't know what spurred it on, but this is where we have this data. And we need to get more current data, but at least they did these wonderful studies back then. And what they showed was that if you were normal weight and you did a 2-day fast, I mean, that's what they did. They did 2 days at that time. And then you did a 2-day fast prior to ovulation. What happened? Well, what they found was that those women would still ovulate, but the peak of estrogen was lower. So it was not as good in ovulation. And what they found was that women who were underweight, they didn't ovulate at all. They stopped. Now, they didn't use overweight because this is the 1990s. They weren't thinking about it. They just did normal weight and underweight. So clearly, there can be an effect, a negative effect on your cycle and on ovulation if you do fasting. And certainly if it's 2 days, if you can add to it, you can make a reasonable assumption it's only going to be a bigger impact, right? If you are doing multi-day fasting during the follicular phase, the phase of the menstrual cycle preceding ovulation, you will either impact the ovulation, make it not as good, or it may block it altogether. But when they did the same type of research and they did the 2-day fasting during the luteal phase, so this is the time after ovulation preceding the onset of the menstrual period, what did they find? Well, it did not affect the next cycle. So the women the next cycle did fine. But what it did do was when they looked, they actually did heart rate variability. They actually measured the autonomic nervous system, and they found that women increased their parasympathetic tone and lowered their sympathetic. So in other words, it made women feel calmer and better. Yeah, and so so this is actually a potential tool for women who have, say, really bad PMDD or PMS, because one of the things that happens is they get like that stress response. They get too much cortisol, too much output of their sympathetic, which makes them feel clammy and just they can't sleep, anxiety kind of feeling. So it turned out, interestingly enough, luteal phase fasting for 2 days in women was very calming, and they slept better. They also looked at sleep. So they slept better, they felt better. So it's a no-brainer for any woman that wants to do any sort of actual multi-day fasting. And this is all the data we have right now. So I can't even tell you what happens with 1 day. We don't have the data. So you'd be like biohacking, right? You'd be the data, right? So you're the N of 1. But we know that that it can have beneficial effects on mood and stress, the autonomic nervous system, sleep. It's done in the luteal phase, and in the follicular phase, it can impact negatively on ovulation. So always do any of that sort of multi-day fasting. If you're into that in your reproductive age and you're having cycles, do it after ovulation, so you can use an ovulation tracker, so you know what you're, and that's what you should do. In terms of losing weight, like if you're doing like 1, 2, 3 days a week, where you're doing fasting, alternate day fasting, we just don't have any data. So once again, I would say use yourself as an N of 1, and just, you're not trying to get pregnant. The worst that happens is you don't ovulate 1 cycle. So you're not going to, it's not self-destruction. So, we don't know. So I would love to get data, we, like you alluded to very, clearly in the very beginning when we started talking, they don't do enough studies with women, and women are more complex than men. Until until 2015, the NIH did not even require that females, whether they're humans or mice, be included in any studies. They didn't. You could just do in study after study, mice and humans didn't matter, and no females ever on the scene, none. So much of the data that we have has no applicability to females. You're making a big stretch of the imagination to say that what happened in the men is going to happen in the women. And when we start doing female specific research, we're finding that it wasn't applicable, like statins are very different in females than males, so like much less benefit in females.
Yeah, and even at the age group too, like you're saying, when cycling women, and then what about menopausal women? They're like, okay, and then even there's a difference, right, with women who are on HRT,
absolutely,
because their estrogen levels, or more specifically estradiol, is higher, which also impacts the optimal results you get from fasting. Is there a correlation there with that as well?
Well, I love that you brought that up, and we have absolutely no data. I have observation, but I also have science. So let's just mention the science. So estrogen in the form of estradiol, that's the estrogen made by reproductive age functioning ovaries, is critically important for the activation and production of NAD, which is a coenzyme for the sirtuins. Those are the histone deacetylase enzymes that are critically important for instituting the act of autophagy, also for AMP kinase. That's a kinase that triggers oxidation of fat in your mitochondria. So it's fat burning, and creating energy. So if you don't have enough estrogen, you're not going to have the same capability of getting any of the benefits that you get from fasting, that all the, and taking NAD and have all the things that a lot of the anti-aging practices and anti-aging gurus, and they're talking about, this is, they're talking about, NAD and the sirtuins and all. Well, they always forget the estradiol component. It doesn't work right. You don't have estrogen in the mix, it simply isn't going to work right. There's a bidirectional, we'll say, codependence of the sirtuins and estradiol. They feed back on each other. You know how everything is like these bidirectional. If you don't have one, the other one is not going to be as right. So you need them both. And without estradiol, the sirtuins, the NAD, none of it's going to be functioning properly. That's why without enough estrogen, mitochondria don't work right. It's that simple. And you're not going to have proper autophagy. Estradiol is critical for autophagy, and it's working through these specific enzyme systems. So of course, if you have, this is my deduction without, because no one's done the studies, but we have the science. So that, so we're just making a hypothesis here based on real science, that if you have a woman who is menopausal, we'll say even early menopausal, because we're certainly not talking about 70-year-olds and older, but even 65. We have very limited data on almost anything once you hit 65 and older. They don't even want to study those people, forget it. It's a complete free-for-all once you get into the older ages for most everything, except maybe, Alzheimer's drugs. So once you, like say a woman who is say 56, so she's been in menopause for 6-7 years or something like that, and she's not on any hormones, and you have another woman who's on physiologic dosing of hormones. So she's not just taking like a whiff of hormones, she's actually on doses that are actually comparable, at least on average. It's not like you're 25 again, but you're having levels that at least are in the range of some of the time that when you were younger, so it's not ridiculously low levels, which is what a lot of people are using. So when you compare the benefits that you're going to get from doing time-restricted eating, from fasting, different programs and so on, it can't be logically that you're going to get the same degree of benefit, because estrogen in the form of estradiol is what makes all of the benefits of fasting happen. You need that. It's like, it would be like you took a 7-year-old boy with a crazy mother, and she wanted him to look like the cover of Muscle Man magazine. He's 7 years old. So she
Yeah.
hires a trainer, she gives him creatine and she gives him a lot of protein drinks,
Yeah.
and everything else. And then she works him out, and months later, he still looks like now a scrawny little 7.5-year-old boy,
Mhm.
because he doesn't have any testosterone. How is he going to
Mm.
build
Yeah.
giant muscle? I mean, men know this. That's why they want their testosterone, right? It's
Mhm.
like, because they know that without testosterone, they're not going to have those big muscles. And of course, some men have taken it to an extreme, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a little bitty boy and he doesn't have any testosterone, he
Yeah.
can like do weightlifting forever. He's not going to look like muscle man front page
Mhm.
material. So
Yes.
without our hormones, our bodies can't deliver the goods. You're just not going to build the same kind of a body. You're not going to have the same results if you don't have the hormones to direct these metabolic systems. So, that tells it all, my bias, right? I'm very
Yeah.
pro hormone, but, I'm pro science and data
Mhm.
driven, based on we know how these things interact. We know from lots of research. So why would we think that in the human body, it's going to behave differently?
Yeah. That's interesting because I know there's a lot of women that don't want, HRT. And then there's some that's just like, give that to me. I want to feel great. I want to feel energetic. I want to age gracefully. And it's almost like they're two different women. And especially if you're trying to work with, in the realm of using intermittent fasting as a modality, they're going to get two different results
Yeah.
because of their own, but not only their chemistry, but also there's so many other parameters of how they manage stress, sleep, what are they eating, are they
Right.
exercising? Because as we mentioned earlier, we do become anabolic resistance as we get older, and that really challenges me on a daily basis. Okay, I got to push heavy things and I got to lift weights because a lot of women, as we get older, what do we start dealing with? Osteoporosis and the hip fractures, and we're losing muscle mass, and so we have to be very proactive with our health. Now, I wanted to ask you something because I know you and I deal with a lot of women that come in, and we see this so much, and there always seems to be like a time of stress and even prolonged stress where we have women with hypothyroid, Hashimoto's, we have adrenal fatigue. I mean, that's not clinically a term, but patients come in, they say, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
think I have adrenal fatigue. Well, it's more, as we talk about, it's hypothalamus pituitary adrenal
Right,
dysregulation more than
right.
anything,
Exactly, right.
but what have you seen as far as fasting and with those kind of women? What have you seen
Yeah.
that with
Well,
that?
just as when a patient comes in my office, I don't say, let's start fasting. I say,
Mhm.
first, we want to get you nutrient repleted, right? So many people, and includes many overweight people, are
Mhm.
actually very malnourished. They're very
Mhm.
deficient in many very vital nutrients. And you can't run the cellular machinery if you don't have the right nutrients. So if you go and you look up like the Krebs cycle, and you see at
Mhm.
each stage how you create energy, right? And you need to have magnesium and B2 and B12. You need all these things. You need a whole slew of different nutrients and amino acids, and without them, you just are not going to function properly. So
Yes.
first, we want to focus on fundamentals, like, okay, let's work on this. We'll call it adrenal fatigue, and we know it's the axis involving the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the adrenal, and it's triggered by all kinds of stressors, and stressors come in many shapes and forms, right? So
Mhm.
we've got to work on foundational health before we ever get into any more advanced types of things. You
Mhm.
can actually make people really in bad shape if you take someone who's malnourished and really stressed out, and then you start fasting them. So,
Mhm.
but fasting by doing time restricted eating is different, because you're going to start with that huge breakfast, which gets people
Mhm.
off to the best start. So
Mhm.
their bodies are going to be adapted to being healthy, and metabolically stable when you feed in the morning. And
Mhm.
for someone who is very severely underweight or very stressed, or very frail, like, and then this includes, of course, children who are in a different category. We would never do fasting type things in children, right? Because they need to have a different type. They're still growing, but frail people and really depleted people, those are people that I will feed multiple times in the day. So everything that I said is on its head, turned on its head for people who need to maybe put on weight, right? Because they're underweight and they're frail and they're really malnourished. And they, so sometimes in the beginning, we actually have to do multiple meals a day. That's where the individual approach, the precision, personalized medicine. So, and then we have to build them up, and then we move to the next phase. So some people, it's like the pre-phase, you know, so you have to start even before, you know, doing time restricted eating. You have to do multi-meal feeding and just get them to start eating real food and start getting their bodies healthier and nourished before you then even move to the next step of time restricted eating. So, you know, you definitely, people who would have the equivalent of adrenal fatigue should not start out with really restrictive types of programs for eating.
Okay, got it. So kind of summarizing everything that I mean, it's so much, and we can speak for this hours because there's so many other key points that, you know, we can go hours in talking about. But really, I mean, in essence, it's almost like, if I want to put this in a systematic way, I would say, okay, first of all, just you can start with the 12-12. Okay, just you know, for 12 hours, you know, and then fast for 12 hours. And if you're on the standard American diet, then you still start there. If you're, you know, eating whole foods, then you can start there. Once you're there, then you can start. I always say focus on those 3 meals a day with protein, with your bigger meal in the morning, and try to cut off earlier in the evening, just because there's more benefits, and kind of extend that fast. And then you can start adding in whether you want to do a 24-hour water fast, or if you want to do an every other day fast, or just, there's different days, but also you have to be mindful of your age. You know, if you're pregnant, of course, you don't want to do that. So, and you have to look at stress, what kind of stress levels. So it's really, I think, just starting with real food for a lot of people, but other people that are more advanced would say, you know, you really should work with a practitioner. And it's not someone you just check in, oh, I'm going to check in with you once a month. It's like, no, when you're doing something like this, you should really work closely, like someone like you or I, who work with patients on a daily basis. And I know that you have patients, you know, all over the world that you work with. And the beauty of video chat nowadays, we get to help more people. So that's so exciting. But really to work with someone that is experienced in this. And I mean, we didn't get into this, so maybe another time we can just talk everything about the fasting mimicking diet, because I know you've had tremendous success. You were one of the pioneers with that, and you were even, you know, that was just a lot was happening in your office with your patients with the Prolon program, right? So I would love to get you back on with that, because
that would be fun. We can talk more in depth. And also, you know, there are some people out there, some clinics and such, that are doing really long fasts, and we can talk about the pros and cons of that for the future.
Yes. But, you know, this is just a good part where people can start, and just knowing what fasting is. There's different types of fasting: long, intermittent, but optimal. You get a lot of benefits in those 3 days, but there's just so much, and it can be customized and individualized for each person. And I think that's what I really want them, the takeaway to be, is there's different ways to do intermittent fasting, and it all depends on what your health goals are for that. Is that fair enough to say?
Absolutely. And that for people, once they're beyond like the most frail stage, to just accept that we are humans, we are earthlings, and that we are not best off when we snack all day and night. We have to stop that. No more snacking all day and night, and accept, you know, our genetic destiny, and then embrace it. And then we will be healthier and happier creatures.
Absolutely, 100%. So one question before we leave, what are you grateful for today? One thing that you are grateful for today?
I am so grateful that actually that my husband is really dealing with, we had talked about this when we first came on, that my mother-in-law just recently died. And that's always a trauma, you know, even for elderly, when, you know, because we love them, and so hard to lose someone that you love. And, you know, it was just really hard for my husband, myself, and that I'm grateful that my family came together. They created a beautiful memorial, and, you know, really a testament to her life and our ongoing life. And it really is the beautiful rhythms of life, accepting the reality and the love that comes with having mortality and a loving family. So, you know, I'm grateful that we can accept, you know, a loss, but move on and look forward to the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. When that just opens eyes for a lot of people to just, you know, be grateful for the present moment, because the present moment is just, it's a present, it's a gift, because we never know 24 hours from now where we're going to be, or a loved one is going to be. Never to take anybody for granted. Or thank you so much for sharing that with. All right, y'all, we'll see you next week. There's so much that I know people are going to go back and listen to this, and so am I with be taking notes. But we will catch everyone next week. Thanks for being on here live with us. And Dr. Felice Gersh, you can go to her website as well. What is it that you prefer on Instagram, website? You do a lot on Instagram. So,
well, I'm focusing right now on Instagram, and everything then ultimately gets archived on the YouTube channel. And, you know, I'm looking forward to creating more regular blogs, but right now it seems like people like video, so I'm focusing on the video model for right now.
Yes. Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll put all that information in here so people can get a hold of you as well. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week. See you later. Bye.
Bye.